you can only ignore these things so much, can't you? It is pretty important who's sat around that cabinet table, who's representing the industry. Still winds me up that a sector that is as economically important as ours and provides as many jobs and support as ours. How many times have we spoken about it? So much good within society, not just the economy, and yet we don't have a senior cabinet post. Construction kind of gets lumped into business, and housing gets separated over here.
One thing to say on that, just going through the list of notable appointments, there are so many, to your point, that are linked to our industry, built environment construction, and what we do and how important it is. There isn't one that is fully focused, built environments.
Welcome to Politics Disrupted.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Adobe Acrobat.
Ryan, hello. Good afternoon, which sounds a bit weird because we don't usually record in the afternoon. No need to go into details as of why. How are you doing?
Hanging on in there. Yeah, shan't be too graphic or overshare for fear of losing every listener within the first minute. But yeah, getting there, mate. You okay?
I'm good. I have got a quick question for you, though.
Go on.
Which might lead us nicely into our first headline.
Hmm.
That is, how good are you at building cabinets?
Not phenomenal. Need instructions. Certainly not as good as our new Prime Minister, who's had a pretty drastic clear out. Again, and welcome to Politics Disrupted, I guess, while we get stuck into this first story. But you can't start anywhere else, can you? I think to bring listeners in a little bit to the way that we prep this, the kind of long list of stories for potential sort of discussion this week, maybe half would be governmental and policy. Yeah, it's the big overriding thing away from construction in more general terms seems to be that the purging of the Starmerites is kind of the way that it's been posited. That anyone that kind of showed any sort of loyalty to previous prime minister has been dealt with by and large. Lots of people rewarded for maybe not sort of outwardly rebelling, but yeah, maybe not being as supportive as they perhaps could have been. And yeah, consequently, we've got some familiar names, but to all intents and purposes, a very new look cabinet, isn't it? So I think job number one for us is to kind of run through some of the key names that people need to be aware of. And I appreciate we have been tongue in cheek sort of talking about politics disrupted and so on, but yeah, knowing our audience and the kind of roles they have, and obviously their vested interest in the sector, you can only ignore these things so much, can't you? It is pretty important who's sat around that cabinet table, who's representing the industry. We are on a normal year between 8 and 9% of GDP, and then all of the jobs created within the sector as a result. Let me get on my high horse nice and early for a change. Still winds me up that a sector that is as economically important as ours and provides as many jobs and support as ours. And again, how many times have we spoken about it, Pete, as kind of through infrastructure and housing and hospital builds and school builds as kind of the catalyst for so much good within society, not just the economy. And yet we don't have a senior cabinet post. Construction kind of gets lumped into business, and housing gets separated over here. So, and that's not criticism of this government. It's been that way forever. But yeah, it blows my mind.
One thing to say on that, and you're the expert on politics disrupted very much on this podcast, but just going through the list of notable appointments and more the titles that people hold. And there are so many, to your point, that are linked to our industry, built environment construction, and what we do and how important it is. But like you just said, there isn't one that is fully focused, built environments, X, Y, and Z, whatever it might be. The title, you've got, I'll let you go into it in a bit more detail, but you've got housing, you've got energy, you've got education, which is linked to it, business and trade, transport, environment, I suppose AI in a way now, and housing. But there isn't that overall collective responsibility. Like you said, it's dotted around, and hopefully we are starting to join the dots with some of these appointments.
And maybe, if I'm going to be generous, that might be part of the pushback, Pete, is that it's so broad, and there's so many. We've spoken about it last week, didn't we? There's so many kind of micro sectors and discrete supply chains that make up the wider sector that maybe there can't be a singular role. I just and there's cabinet reshuffles, there's everything else. There's I just feel like it needs a clear named person. With that kind of probably segues quite nicely to one major named person. We touched on it a little bit last week, but Angela Rayner returning as housing secretary, which has been pretty warmly applauded by the sector. Surprised me somewhat. I thought that it would be very well received by those in social housing and those pushing for affordable housing. We talked a little bit last week about some of the noise coming out of Burnham's introductory speech on this wave of council house building and sort of undoing some of the things that have happened economically over the last 4 decades. So I thought that was a very, very good fit there. But to see some of the private sort of national house builders coming out in support, that I think by all accounts the sector kind of felt that she was a decent advocate. I think to have housing held by someone that at the time was also deputy party leader, that at that point I raised that we don't have a kind of clear minister for construction at the top table, but there's someone with one of the big jobs of state was responsible for housing delivery. That's her appointment has been pretty universally applauded by the sector, which again it surprised me. It really, really surprised me. So clearly the conversation she was having prior to her stepping away from her duties last year, she was doing a good job of building that network and building those relationships. So that's massively positive. John Healey as Chancellor, I think, was the one that caught everybody flat-footed. Not a name that was in any of the kind of main runners and riders for that. But infrastructure funding, we've already seen that part of the reason that Healey resigned from Starmer's cabinet, who's the head of defence there, was we've got these new funding commitments, and infrastructure looked like the soft underbelly of where some of that money was going to be pulled from one department to another. I think that's one of the things that they've been saying, is that they don't really want to introduce new taxes. They don't want to deviate too much from the manifesto because that might trigger another general election. And Lord knows, we as a sector, we do not need the uncertainty that comes with that. There's been so many in the last sort of decade that I can't face another one, Pete. In order that'll be John Healey's job as Chancellor, is to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul in some respects. And how many times have we spoken about 725 billion of infrastructure budget? I think keep an eye on that. I would say, I think if anyone's looking at any of those frameworks, or if anyone has an eye on any of those bigger sort of mega projects that we've discussed at length, I would say accelerate towards those pretty quickly, because you want to get committed to that before any of that funding starts to look very appealing to defence or any other sectors. And again, several others. Miatta Fahnbulleh as Energy Secretary is sort of a pretty junior minister. I believe she only joined Parliament as part of the 2024 intake, but rising star, very, very, very highly thought of, and she's picked up the energy brief. So again, not squarely in our world, but has massive implications for our world and the kinds of infrastructure that gets built. So she'd be one to keep an eye on. One bit of you mentioned AI. There is specifically an AI minister now. So again, that will have a bit of an impact. Matthew Pennycook, I would say, is probably the continuity cabinet member, in that he's one of the very, very few that has retained the sort of senior housing and planning role supporting Angela Rayner. And the big breaking news, I guess, the benefit of doing this in the afternoon, is that there's been further movement today in that Chris MacDonald, who's kind of the construction minister as a junior title, has been shuffled out in favour of a Blair McDougall, who I must admit I don't know an awful lot about, other than he's a Scottish MP. He's been all day. Mr. McDougall is the 28th construction minister this century, which does that say the kind of level of antipathy that perhaps the role and therefore the sector is held in by government? Is it any wonder that we struggle for consistent communication, and that we've asked questions on skills and various other things about who's ultimately responsible for holding this here? We're on our 28th. I think we've bemoaned the number of prime ministers that we've had over the last decade, but that's over to you to tell me your thoughts on it, Pete. But on the face of that, it's just that logic says it will continue, but it shouldn't continue, should it?
Yeah. To use a football analogy, you change your defensive five, if you like, and you're in trouble. Defenses win your leagues at the end of the day, and it's that consistency across the board that you need, and hopefully he's made the right appointments. This article that we're taking some of this information from, or that we decided to run with, was from PCB today, and it highlights some of the faces that could have an impact more than others in the construction industry. The one thing that really stood out for me in the whole article in its entirety is the word housing, and it's always going to be mentioned for obvious reasons. I'm sure there's a number we're trying to reach for housing in some way, shape, but we might cover that soon. But yeah, with everybody that commented, from the Federation of Master Builders, Chartered Institute of Housing, and various other quotes and comments, housing was firmly there in almost every single one, a lot, and it's a barometer for our industry. I get that, but we're a lot more than just housing.
Yeah.
So yeah, he needs to get that right, and that's firmly on his agenda. Obviously, I don't think you can say the words Andy Burnham without housing and social housing being mentioned. But yeah, it needs to be wider than that, because we are a bigger industry. But that is a central focus for them, it seems.
Yeah, for certain. And I guess to close that, I would say no slight to Blair McDougall, to anyone else that's kind of, and congratulations to everyone that's picked up these roles. I think where his role specifically is a little concerning for me, and I'm not naive. I think when prime ministers come in, there are literal political appointments that it's advantageous to have someone from this part of the party or that part of the party, or maybe I owe someone a favour for their support as part of my rise in leadership and so on. I think that the slight frustrating thing was that I recall, we may even have spoke about it on the podcast, Pete, but I certainly remember when Chris MacDonald was appointed, a big part of that being heralded as such a shrewd move was that he'd spent 2 decades in industry prior to coming into politics and then picking up this brief. And, people always ask the question about, is it best to have a career politician that understands the way the Whitehall and the system works and therefore is a more effective minister? Or are you better off having someone that is sort of has served time at the coalface, so to speak, and understands a bit more about the lived realities of the sector? So, good luck to Mr. McDougall. Good luck to the rest of the people mentioned. But yeah, that's a slight. It's one of a couple of slight frustrations that I've got with it. I just hope that I'll stop moaning. I'll look to the positives and just I hope that this is to continue your football analogy. We stick with this team for a while now. Because the stakes are so high that I don't think we can afford any more tinkering. I think it has to be about delivery at this point. So good luck to all of them, and let's see where we get to.
Speaking of sticking with, now's the perfect time. It's seamless. This podcast just seamless. Now's the perfect time to mention our partners, Adobe Acrobat, and in homage to what's been going on in government, I just want to highlight the new elements that are coming through in Adobe Acrobat, of which there are many. What Adobe are doing in general, they're creating this ecosystem where a lot of their products are starting to be interconnected. From Adobe Acrobat Studio alone, you can obviously create a PDF. You can start to generate a presentation from a file. You can actually start to stylize your PDF. If you've got branding and colorization and fonts, you can embed them with a couple of clicks. You can even edit images and generate images. You can do things like crop, remove backgrounds with the connectivity with Adobe Express. So there's so many things you can do within Adobe Acrobat Studio. You need to go and check it out because it saves you time, it saves you money.
Well, I would say, speaking to peers of the industry, the sheer volume of framework bid opportunities at the minute, the sheer volume of tenders that exist, the size of the prize in several parts of the sector. I know bid teams are being asked to submit more and more tenders and are being asked to kind of do more with the headcount that they've got. Tools like this are invaluable in that respect, making sure that your bids are as professionally presented as possible.
Back to our old friend, building safety regulator. He's back. And this is from Construction News. And this is the BSR puts main contractors on notice over subcontractor quality. So this is massively important in my eyes, and the basic premise of this headline is to say that there's multiple gateways, of which I'll let you explain in a minute, but just because a high-risk building has completed a certain gateway in going live and being a building for tenure, it doesn't mean you can start to relax and not take other things seriously, like the quality of workmanship and how you're treating subcontractors, which I think is a fantastic thing. So what's your take on this one?
Well, I think we've become the unofficial cheerleaders, haven't we, for the building safety regulator, going back as far as sort of October, November last year. And I think, again, you're hard pressed to argue with some of the results that the Andy Rowan team have achieved on getting things moved along. With the fact we haven't had to mention Gateway 2 in a little while, and I think part of me thinks that this is them flexing muscle because they built up the sort of political capital to do so. So yeah, again, pulling one of the what I thought was one of the very key quotes that came out of the construction news article from Andy Rowe is that this isn't about them seeing a raft of emerging problems. We are anticipating rather than waiting for something to happen. So this is the regulator not just being a passive, we'll look at the bids that are coming in. Again, so you mentioned earlier, Pete, about, what is Gateway 2? Gateway 2 within the Building Safety Act is basically, it's the stop-go point. It's where you submit your plans, particularly for high-rise buildings. And the job of the regulator is to look and pass-fail it, basically. And they've had the devil's own task of bringing down waiting times on that. It's been such a hot potato and such a sort of key topic of discussion at a point where we are so desperate to get housing units built and to hit that mythical target that we reference all the time, that a lot of blame got pinned on the regulator as kind of being a bit of a bottleneck. And actually, they've done a really, really good job of bringing down times on their side in terms of how quickly it's taking for them to assess things and to give that pass-fail rating. But they've also, with that, pushed back a lot of the industry on. We've spoken about it before, things like standardization and quality of submission and so on. That we're not here to draft these submissions for you; it's on you to do that. And so they're still seeing lots of the same faults. They're still seeing lots of things go wrong. They're seeing things past planning, and then I guess the crux of this is that subcontractor quality not being high enough. So then at Gateway 3, where this becomes about approval to move on from there, they're in a position where they have to say no and things get kicked back around again. So we said before, we don't want to, for all this culling of red tape and this need to sort of move and get things done, you can't do that at the expense of life safety. And again, stuck record, it comes around every couple of weeks, but it's because it's so important. This all came out of Grenfell, and we as a sector have an obligation to the people that will create and then live in these buildings afterwards and maintain them. We can't cut corners. The building safety regulator is one of those Hackett inquiry recommendations that I think is a good one. Even if you don't, it's not going anywhere. And so I think the time is right for them to be able to have more of a wide view on this. I think subcontractors play such a crucial role in delivery that it's right that they are answerable for that. And so if we're the way that the supply chain exists and the way that we build isn't likely to change anytime soon, and therefore this seems like the most logical means of sort of pushing that through. What do you think on this one, Pete?
Very, very similar. It isn't a case of we know this is coming and we can foresee a lot of errors occurring because of poor workmanship. Far from it. It's a case of we're holding up our end of the bargain. New build Gateway 2 applications fallen from 50 weeks to around 20 weeks. So instead of waiting the whole year, you're waiting five odd months. And the stats speak for themselves in terms of getting design approval and then moving on to Gateway 3 and completion. But like you rightly said, it can't be at the detriment to safety. And it shouldn't be, this isn't I'm sure we've said this before, this isn't a bar is here, this is where you should reach. That bar should be way, 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 way below where you're trying to reach in terms of the quality of build. And there's pricing to consider and margins, and companies, they're there, they exist to make money. But having said that, you look at the whole supply chain, everybody wants and needs to make money. That's why they're in business. And it seems to me that there's a lot of joined up thinking that needs to happen and is happening, both government side and building side, which is the way it should be. So I'm all for this, and I'm all for them putting these things in place to say, just because you got approval to build it doesn't mean it's plain sailing and we're not coming to regulate like they should be.
Yeah, I'm going to lose some friends here, I suspect, that work within main contractors. But there was one of the key sort of bits for me that I took out of this as a direct quote from Andy Rowe. If you as a main contractor do not have someone who has the professional expertise to understand what quality your contractor should be delivering, then you're probably not doing your job. And he mentioned that doesn't need to have back in the day, every contractor would have had a clerk of works who was personally responsible for going around assessing work done and kind of rubber stamping it. And it's something, again, I spoke about this at length a couple of weeks back, that the Code for Construction Product Information, the element of the post-Hackett recommendations that I've been closest to. And that's what that calls for, is what they call a named technically competent person on the kind of technical side of things and on the marketing side of things to ensure that the marketing messaging is correct. But it puts the pressure on that person that, who's responsible for this, kind of shrug shoulders, not sure, that there's no ambiguity. It's Peter Sumpton was the person that signed this off on this date and so on. I can't believe that doesn't exist. But I think it's absolutely crucial that it does. And then the reason that I say that I'm going to lose friends with those that work at main contractors is, if the main contractor can't do that, what purpose does it serve? It's a glorified project management position at that point, then, isn't it? The actual delivery work and the on-site services are being delivered for the most part by specialist subcontractors. You're the interface with the client, but if that's all you're doing, could you not just appoint a project manager or QS or something else along those lines to do that? Time to step up, I guess, if that is the case.
Yeah, and there's so much fascinating technology out there that could help with these things as well. So it's not just a case of it's all down to a singular person to do this on their own clipboard check.
Yeah,
there's so much technology that can help, and if it's a case of it is the cost of doing these things correctly, then the building shouldn't be built anyway if it's not in a reasonable budget. And two, using this technology can save you time and save you money, which I'm a strong advocate of. And yes, it needs testing, and as we've said before, you should use technology to solve real problems and not use technology because you want to use technology. And this seems like a real good opportunity for main contractors in general to test, iterate, and get these things right.
Yeah, and then you're back to something we spoke about at length in recent weeks about better data, better decision making, better sort of traceability going forward. If, God forbid, but if something fails in the future, I want to know what systems have been used. I want to know who installed them. I want to know who authorized them. We should be digitizing all of this stuff anyway. So it does. You're absolutely right, Pete. It does feel like one of those things where you can have the best of both worlds and should.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of tech, our final headline is all about our other friend AI, but in a slightly different twist, this one. So this is from Specification Online. The headline is AI adoption reaches tipping point across UK architecture, but human judgment remains critical. So for me, this is a really interesting one in the way it's framed, in that what the article is basically saying in its main premise is that architects are picking up utilizing AI with some pace. This will have a detriment to roles and jobs and positions, and people that are looking to get into architecture will find it harder and harder to get those relevant skills that a current architect has a need to do their job. I don't fully agree with this in a way. There's a number of stats that we can get into, but for me, it's very much a case of if you flip it and you look at other jobs, for example, if you're a brickie or you are in any trade that uses a drill or a screwdriver, for example, you still know how to use a manual screwdriver as well as a power tool to do that job. And the chances are, if you're a brickie, there's certain things that are more traditional and slower, which you will know if you've either been taught them or pick up over time, while you do more modern, skilled versions of those roles.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with architecture, to be perfectly honest. I get the premise, but I'm not 100% convinced that it's going to play out like this article's saying it will.
Yeah, I completely agree. We speak about it all the time with AI. You still need, ties in very, maybe this is my takeaway to a certain extent, but it ties in with the story before. You still need that competent human to be able to run the AI. You or I couldn't sit down. Again, I'm damning you here, Pete. Maybe you could and I can't. I couldn't sit down with a piece of technology and ask it to design me a building. And again, we've spoken about it before. It's a real minimizing of what people believe the architect's role to be. If you think it's not just how a building looks, it's how it functions, it's safety, it's quantities, it's all of that stuff. And yeah, we've spoken before about the REBA president resigning and so on, and the better definitions for the role of architects. I can see AI is not the enemy when it comes to research, although again, treat it with a pinch of salt and kind of understand where those bits of research are coming from. You're better placed to do that if you are competent and understand what it is that you're looking for in the first place and can make an apples and apples comparison when the data comes back. Looking for materials and sort of the veracity of claims being made back to CCPI and so on, I can see AI playing a role in that. Data storage, looking at past projects that you've worked on or similar kinds of projects to look for what worked, what didn't, and so on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't see it replacing the human creating and designing and understanding how a space should feel and interpreting the need of the client and sort of making sure that the final thing works, etc. It's humans who create, isn't it? I think it's AI as tool. Very, very interestingly, I saw an article yesterday, which was a controversy bomb, in Architects Journal by a chap called Russell Curtis. He thinks there's too many architects, and he actually thinks that, in contrast to what we're talking about here, that there needs to be a bit of a squeeze on that. The rates per hour are being sort of raced to the bottom. Work's being more competitive. There is less work happening. Back to our previous story on BSR and things actually being committed to the point of build stage and so on. And the industry is probably in a point of correction. That some of what's in the article from the stats point of view may prove to be true. It means that practices will need to recruit fewer people. But his counter argument is that that's maybe no bad thing. That there probably are a few too many practicing architects at the minute, and it's why the sector's struggling for identity. It's why the sector's struggling for a clear definition of the role. It's because there's so many people that claim that role and have sort of very disparate roles in practice, so to speak. So, a very interesting contrary take.
So just to get onto some of the stats, so use of AI for most projects is up 15% from last year, and 75% of practices reported improved productivity using AI, and nearly 60% saw a positive return, but only 17% believed AI has improved design quality. I just think they're asking the wrong questions. Because like you said, the architect is there for various reasons, both from a legal, regulatory perspective, but also from that imaginative design perspective as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, I'm with you on all of that, and it doesn't surprise me. Yeah, 70% believe AI actually produces better designs. Agreed. And 77% say human creativity remains irreplaceable. And again, I completely agree. Going back to the piece we did after Frank Gehry's passing a while back, one of the things that the buildings, that's the legacy that he's left behind and so on. We mentioned the modelling and iterative sort of design was a key part of this process. Well, his willingness to use software. I think I mentioned that while it wasn't AI, one of the things that he pioneered was taking a piece of software that had originally been designed for use in aerodynamics for airplanes. Um, and he was the first person to kind of use that, and therefore could create these kind of flowing, almost liquid effects kind of facades that he became famed for in the end. And I think that's the way that it should go. It's intelligent human that is a master of their discipline, taking a bit of lateral thinking and looking at something in a different way, and then being able to push that forward. And I think AI is crucial in that. But that doesn't mean that you devolve your thinking to it, and you certainly don't devolve your creativity to it. Again, we've spoken about hallucinations with LLMs and so on. I think all of that makes it even more crucial that the person doing the inputs is a master of their trade and is in control of what's going in and coming out. So yeah,
There was two things, just two final points. So the article quotes one contributor saying the fundamental training that young people might otherwise get when they enter the sector becomes increasingly less available to them. Okay, but that's surely your sector's responsibility to make sure that isn't happening. It's not like AI is coming in and you can't enforce things or stop things or have that training. So make sure your practice has that training ready for people coming in. And the second part, and this is why I just feel it's a bit weak, these stats, is that this a direct quote from the article. While there is no clear evidence of sector-wide AI-induced staff cuts, it's like, okay, so we're saying that AI is going to reduce the number of architects and people in architectural practices, but there's no clear evidence that is happening. So let's just put it in place that, yes, the chances are some roles will be defunct, but they'll be replaced by very different roles and very different skill sets. So it's about moving with the times, which we've been saying for ages about AI. It's part of the skill set. It's not, you can have both, you can have both things.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think all the things that they flagged aren't unique to the practice of architecture. I think every sector will be having similar kinds of conversations with itself at the minute. And yeah, my ultimate feeling with all of this is that if you want to safeguard your job, not that you need to become an AI expert, but become an expert in your job. The best architects will be the ones that survive because they are the best architects. It's not saying that you have to be an AI first business. It's not outsource all of your design through AI. It's it's keep your side of the street clean. And yeah, I would think 9 times out of 10 you're going to be okay.
For sure. I'm going to give my takeaway first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
Fantastic. So it leads nicely on from that last story, and to coin a phrase in marketing by a famous professor who I've got a man crush on, bothism. And this is very much in that ilk of, it's not one or the other. It's not AI or human intelligence. It's utilizing both, and we can use both, and we should be. I don't think anybody is an advocate for letting AI run everything, because we start to become a little redundant from a humanity perspective there, and nobody of any sane mind is going to say that AI should just be disbanded and not used, because it has huge benefits for in multiple industries, if not every industry. So bothism, use both, and that is fine.
Yeah. No, it's a really good shout. I thought mine might be about competence. That felt like the sort of common thread that stitched all three together. But I think mainly off the back of that last one, but it works a little bit with the building safety regulator and what they're asking. But competence and ownership, I think, are absolutely crucial. That there's always going to be an external factor, and we Lord knows in this sector we've had enough of them from a macroeconomic point of view. But technology will change. The economy is largely beyond our control. There are going to be governmental factors and policies that we may agree with or disagree with. Look after your bit of it as well as you can. Try and insulate yourself as well as you can from these external factors, because they are beyond your control. Yeah, I think it's very easy to point at that, whether it's AI, government, or whatever else. That's the problem. So what? To a certain extent, it always will be. So yeah, get on board with it and find a way through.
Yeah. And speaking of control, we've got full control of this podcast because we create it and edit it and produce it and publish it. So on that note, I think regular programming will resume next week, and I'll speak to you next week.
Speak to you next week.